A person who cheats on.
Well, yeah, a person who's engaged in lustful activities.
Yeah.
And this guy, he never. What it says is he never. There was no harlot that he hadn't visited. That's how it says. And he found out that there was this one really expensive prostitute that charged like a whole sack of like gold coins at the other end of the world. And so the story's about to get stranger. And he says that he walks across 7 rivers. There were 7 rivers separating him and her, and he gave her the money and whatever. And then afterwards, the story gets even stranger. Afterwards, how do you say this in a polite way?
Uh-oh.
Trying to think of a polite way to say this. Hello. Hey, Eric. Hello. Good to see you. How you doing? Get some food, man.
How are you?
Okay, afterwards, this is what it says. She passes gas. I'm not kidding. That's what it says.
Thank you.
And then she tells him, just like that gas that just will never return to its source, so too you will never return to your source. I.e., you will never repent. You'll never become an upstanding member of society. And he got all shaken up and all inspired in the story. And he says, so he went and he sat between 2 mountains and he started praying. And what did he say? First, he says, hills and mountains, pray that there should be mercy, that I should be able to repent. And the hills, he's like asking the hills and the mountains to be his benefactors and pray for him. And they say, no, we have to pray for ourselves. We have to pray for ourselves. Heaven and earth, pray for me. He says, no, heaven and earth respond. We have to pray for ourselves. Sun and the moon, pray for me. No, we have to pray for ourselves. Stars and constellations, pray for me. We have to pray for ourselves. And then he says, the matter only depends upon me. If I'm going to improve myself, no one's going to help me, right? I can't rely on the hills. I can't rely on the oceans. I can't rely on the sun. I can't rely on anything. It's only up to me. And he says that he puts his head between his knees and he started just crying. And then he died. That's the story. And then there was a proclamation of prophecy that says that this fellow, his name was Eliezer ben Dudoi, this was his name. He's destined for life in the world to come. I.e., he repented and he's free of sin. Okay, that's the story. And then one of the rabbis, whose name was just Rabbi, right? A rabbi whose name is Rabbi. One called, Rebbe. In the entire Talmud, he's famous Rabbi Judah the Prince, right? Was friendly with the emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, I believe. He was friends with him. And he heard the story and he started crying. And he said the following statement: one may acquire eternal life after many years, another in a single hour. Means some people work the whole life to try to achieve perfection, and this one guy got it in a mere instant, in one episode, one day, 1 hour. That's the story. And all the commentaries ever trying to find out what it means, what the lessons are, what the story is, what the meaning. It's a fascinating story. You heard the whole story, Eric? You familiar with it? And turns out, so my Chavrusa tells me, he's like, wait a minute. There's 2 other places in the Talmud. Where it says the same exact line. That some people acquire their world in a mere instant, while other people's takes them a long, long time. So I was intrigued by these particular episodes. So I printed out these particular episodes, and I wanted to do a collaborative effort to try to examine these 3 stories. 2 also similar, very interesting stories. And I have it all written out over here. What I wanted to do is I want to figure out I want to unlock the key that these 3 stories have in common. It's again 3 stories about 3 individuals who had some sort of epiphany, had some sort of paradigm shift, something just clicked, and then They died for whatever reason. Each one of them had their own way that they died. And then there was this proclamation of prophecy. This person is welcome into the world to come. And the same stories that Rebbe or Rabbi started crying. Some people spend their entire life trying to reach perfection. And these guys did it in a mere instant. I want to try to figure out what do these three stories have in common? Because it cannot be that these stories are isolated instances. It can't be that these are just,
These
three
stories?
What?
This true story?
I don't know if it's a true story.
Oh.
Either yes or no.
It's true that it's written in
Yeah, it's true that it's part of the Talmud. So there's certainly a lesson. There's certainly a lesson inherent in the story. Is it literal? Maybe yes, maybe no.
The Talmud was written, obviously it was written
In
the year,
I guess.
I don't know, 200 or so?
Is it a guess?
80?
What do you say, Eric? When was it written? Well, is it relevant when it was written? It was written in the year 500. The Talmud.
Oh, 500.
500, the Talmud. The Mishnah was written in the year 200 or 180 more precisely.
Oh, okay.
But so strange that you'll have these stories and try to figure out what the lesson is and what does it mean? It means some people struggle their whole life to achieve something. It's like winning the lottery. How frustrating is it for people that just
Worked their whole life.
sweat and 18-hour days and 7-day weeks and no family and no nothing, to make their money, and then one guy who's totally unemployed with no skills and and they always win the lottery, and they just boom and just have it all in 1 second, and then they spend it all in there.
Sometimes they lose it too.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to try to figure out the mechanics of how, on a spiritual level, there are things that we could spend years trying to accomplish, and there are things that could just happen like that, with one act, with one heroism, with one act or one instance could define a person. Generally, when you look at people, right, who you look at someone who's not known for his piety or not known for his character, and then you see something, they do an incredible act of goodwill. Generally, that won't change your opinion on them. So you have to understand, why does someone act out of character? But generally, when people have a certain method of behavior, the way they act, the most common character, one act's not going to change that. But somehow in these three stories, we'll find out that there's these three individuals who were unremarkable, wholly unremarkable. One of them was obviously, actually, quite the philanderer. But like that, in one instance, one epiphany, something switched, something clicked, and he's a different man.
Well, if there's a commitment to completely change yourself, then it would change your status.
But he didn't have a chance to be a different man. He just died.
He made the
Well, that's a good question. Why did he die? Did someone shoot him? Was he in a bad neighborhood? Was this in Detroit? What happened? It doesn't say anything like that, right? It just says that he died. It's a great question. Why did he die? It seems like that's part of the story.
No, but like what you're saying, if you see someone that you know is not such a good person, but he suddenly does one thing good, it won't change your opinion of him. But if you wouldn't know, but maybe he's doing it good because he totally changed his whole life.
Yeah, I think that the point that Brown broke, the fact that he died, that's very important to the story.
What do you say? I think that differentiates between just a single act of goodwill, or somebody doing a 180 and all of a sudden they're a terrible person their whole lives, and all of a sudden they walk the lady across it. I think it's the significance of how the trueness of that acceptance. Does that make? I don't know if that makes sense. But I think there's obviously like varying levels of how true that acceptance is of like trying to turn things around, perhaps.
What I think you're saying is that, tell me if I'm correct, that it's not just the perception of this person has changed.
Right. No, of course.
But they really changed.
They really
It means generally there's only one way to change. So if you want to lose a bad habit, how do you lose a bad habit? It means eventually it's like through attrition, right?
Right.
You know, hi, I'm Yaakov and I'm alcoholic. Right?
Sure.
Right? And you're an alcoholic, and there's 12 steps, and you're always in danger of reverting back to who you are, and you don't really change. It's just, that is generally how it is. Somehow in these three stories, the whole thing changed.
It seems like it was accepted, so he didn't need to necessarily live to prove or warrant this change in his life. This change.
He didn't need to live?
Because the commitment was so strong?
The commitment was the intent, the trueness of that acceptance was so strong that he didn't need to live it out to prove to him.
Or maybe, could we say, that he had such a tremendous internal shift of identity. I mean, this change that happened within him was so strong and so impactful that he just died because this is he had a new persona inhabiting him. It just was too dramatic. It was like he had a life transplant.
See, there's a problem with it. Because, like you said, if someone wants to change and they make an effort, they're going to get tested. So this guy said, okay, I'm going to change, I'm going to repent, he got along about in 1 hour, right? But he never really got tested for it. He really never proved himself whether he changed his whole personality or his whole habitual pattern.
Well, who says you have to be tested for it? If you're there, why do you need to be tested?
What do you mean? Abraham was tested.
But when Abraham got tested, this is the point. Abraham didn't use this model of change. Abraham used the standard model of change, which is you start at point A and you do a few small steps and you get to point B, right? And those small steps comprise of tests, challenges, right? Nisyonot. And you get to point B and you move on to point C and you move on to point D and eventually you reach the top of the mountain. It means the tests are not just to measure the change, but rather to provoke the change, to bring about the change. Does that make any sense?
But you can't have to prove the change if you don't get
it. Means, how do you climb a spiritual mountain? How do you climb a spiritual ladder? What is every rung? Every rung is another test. Every rung is another challenge. Every rung you have to overcome something.
So
right? It's like this also with everything.
So maybe for Hashem, this was good enough.
Well, but only for this guy.
For this guy, it was good enough. Now I'm going to take you away. I don't know why he died.
But I also think like we can move the spirituality out of it and say with relationships, right? You meet someone new and you don't know who they are. You don't know anything about them. You may be intrigued, but you're skeptical and you don't know if that person's an axe murderer. We don't know anything about it, right? And you build a relationship slowly. Like trust builds really slowly, and like a relationship should. I always tell people one of my pet peeves, which I have a lot of pet peeves. I have a whole pet store of peeves. One of my pet peeves is that when people are getting married, it's like they're looking forward to the marriage, like that wedding, and they do the reception. It's all about the wedding.
That drives me nuts.
And no one's thinking about the post-wedding. No one's thinking about the next 70, 80, 90, or 100 years. Right? It's all about that one wedding day, which is, it doesn't matter. You're married regardless of whether or not you have a fancy wedding or not, or what the invitations look like. Who cares about that? It's all about the relationship, because the marriage is the first step, or one of the first steps in building this relationship. But that's the way it always is, because there's a relationship constantly deepening. Generally, in our society, the peak of the relationship is is the wedding, and then they spend the next 4 or 5 years unraveling that, and then
and they wake up and say, "Who are you?"
Not who are you? I have the kids and your house and your car.
What are you?
But that's the way it is. But like I said, you want to have a relationship. The way the structure of how a relationship works is that you're constantly building upon. Every step is a deepening of the relationship. It gets better and better and better. And it's like that with anything. You want to build a business. It's step after step, hard work. You want to grow spiritually. You want to change any characteristic, step after step after step. And somehow in this case, or in these three stories, I was able to do it in 1 second.
Is it a fair question to say, is it possible that in terms of this issue of being tested, that some people, they're in life, that their test, I think it's the same test for everybody, essentially, but the way you're tested is very different than the way I'm tested.
Personalized.
It's all personalized.
Individualized.
So maybe for this guy, Mr. Dordia over here, maybe it goes back to this intensity. Like maybe his was boom, one shot. This is your one shot only to do to do it right.
Make the right decision.
Do the right. And this is your one shot.
Basically,
versus other people.
It's kind of like playing poker. He was all in. He had one shot, and it was one or the other.
He could have heard what this woman said and just turned around and walked away.
Well, yeah, it's obviously an amazing story.
Right.
But
what he did was amazing. Was a very.
Is it possible that everyone gets that one opportunity?
No.
It's possible.
It's possible. Well, it's possible, but
it's not for sure.
It's not for sure. Is a interpretation of.
Yeah, but the Talmud has two parts. I don't get into this. I can't speak for 3 hours. Lord knows I can speak for 3 hours. Right? But the Talmud is half halacha, which is law, and half agarata, which is ethics. And generally,
and that's where this is?
Yes, it's in the form of stories, of parables, lessons, sayings, idioms, right? That's what it is. So this particular portion
now
in
these
Talmud,
three stories,
they're three distinct stories in three separate places. All of them following a similar timeline. Someone having some sort of change in by perspective, dying, and then this incredible proclamation, this prophecy that this person is welcome to Olam Haba, and then followed by Rabbi, Judah the Prince, right? By him crying and saying, everyone has to work their whole life to achieve this, and these people achieved it in 1 hour, which made us. It seems to indicate that the general process of change, of improvement, right, of development that we're all used to, like Eric brought nisyonot. Nisyonot means challenges, for tests, and in the Midrash it says nisayon achar nisayon, didulin achar didulin. What that means is one challenge after another challenge, and one growth spurt after another growth spurt. It means the idea of challenges and growth go together in Judaism. We view a challenge as a growth opportunity, right? One step up. We don't believe in jumping rungs so you fall down, right? Everything in moderation, right? Over time you'll see improvement. If you spend 40 days trying to do something consistently, you'll be able to do it, right? If you have a hard time waking up in the morning at the proper time, right? And I'm looking at myself, not anyone else. But you do it for 40 days, it'll become second habit to you, right? If you have anger problems, so do an anti-anger exercise for 40 days, and you'll integrate it in your system. But it's always a slow build-up, slow process. That's how we work. Somehow, these guys figured out to take a way to take a spiritual shortcut, a way to just avoid having to go through that attrition. If that's the right word, but attrition in order to build their spiritual makeup to have tremendous change in a short amount of time. And the previous other story.
But you're making the assumption that they change. I mean, I don't know what the belief is in afterlife. What happens in heaven.
Yeah. Which we spoke about.
But who's to say that they're not changing?
Not changing what?
After, in the presence of God.
What we clearly in Judaism, we clearly believe that once you're dead, you can't improve. That's absolutely true.
You cannot.
You cannot change. You only have one chance. That's so long as you're alive.
You can improve in your another lifetime, though.
Well, if resuscitation, I know, not resuscitation,
reincarnation.
but reincarnation aside, unless you're alive and breathing on planet Earth, right,
Yeah.
with a soul and a body, you cannot improve. That's for sure.
No, I just thought that when from what you were saying, I remember you had mentioned this before that we have several lifetimes, and if we don't accomplish a certain goal,
when I spoke
But that's not a good thing. You don't want to have to come back to.
When I spoke about what happened
That's
down
not-
the line,
your goal is to actually lose your
How do we
brother.
know
that
that
was
they
fucking-
change?
If you want to.
don't ever confuse anything I say with what my brother says.
But the point of the matter is our goal is to reach Olam Haba. We don't want to be to come back, but if we don't complete our mission, we have to come back again. And all our
What's the
life.
point? Well, what's the point though? You have to be alive to change. That's for sure.
How do we know that they changed? Like,
So that's a good point.
yeah. How do we know?
The point is like this: if there's a prophecy that they're welcome into the world to come, means that's an obvious indicator that they really did change.
Okay.
Means there's how we view someone and how God views someone. We could view someone as being I don't know how many times you've ever encountered scandals in your life, or if ever. But if you ever met someone who's really nice and really cool, and a few years later you read in the news that they were arrested for something really bad
or something.
embezzlement's not so bad, but
I had someone for
Murder.
2 weeks. I didn't know him that well. He was just a coworker. So
and
I worked at an amusement park back in college, and there was this guy. He's kind of like a mama's boy.
with a mustache and a white van.
No, he kind of had a round face. I worked with him
Wendigo
maybe
lists.
a few times, so I didn't know him very well. But then, one night there was a news story, and there was a guy with that name who had molested a couple of boys.
Oh. And because we don't really know what other people are going through. We don't know how other people really are.
Right.
You don't really know. But God does really know. Right? And if there's a prophecy that says that this person achieved what they need to achieve in this life, it means that they actually did it. And they actually internally became different people. But somehow they managed to do it in a much more expeditious way than what we need to do.
But maybe it's just enough for God. Like I said, maybe it was enough.
What's the whole point? What's the whole point of all these stories? Because it's not practical. It's not
Why not? Why is it not practical?
Well, how do you do it then? I mean, do you just...
I think the whole point is that it just says there's hope at the last hour. That's all that means at the end of the day.
Well, that's a good
all
lesson
that-
anyhow.
That's all
I see it differently. I see I think it goes back to the whole concept of it's all the same. We're all going to the same. We're all meeting the same end. We're all, everybody dies, and regardless of how much time we're given, the goal is to live a good life and sort of all these things. And you could be literally the scum of the earth, worst person ever, doing terrible things. But if you and it goes back, I think, to that intent. If you wake up and you say, and you do that 180, that all in, what's different than somebody like that than somebody who has led a good life their whole
Studied the Torah.
Basically, they both end up at the same point. They both end up being good, wholesome, moral people, what have you. It's just one. I think. Sure.
Someone who's working their entire life towards the goal is way on a higher level than someone who says, "That's it, God, I repent. I'm fine. I'm never going to go
It's funny
and die."
because what he's saying.
Absolutely no sense.
When I saw the commentaries, the famous commentary of the Maharsha. Google it if you never heard of it. Maharsha, he says exactly you're saying. He says the reason why Rebbe is crying, the reason why the rabbi is crying is because these guys, they achieved something, but they did it in 1 hour's worth. And it has value, but 1 hour's worth of value. While other people, they have years and years worth of accrued effort to bring with them. And I think you're right, but I think there's room to argue. And I kind of think what Jared's saying, listen,
Whether it takes 1 hour or a lifetime, at least it got to the
it's
end
like a
point.
ball game, right? We don't look at the score at halftime and say, Super Bowl champions.
Yeah.
We look at what is the score when the clock hit 000. That's what matters.
I mean, this is maybe like I don't know how this works, but like, what about children? Like, what if you have like a really bad, like an evil kid? You know, he like picks on the other kids and all this stuff, whatever it is, and like internally, like that true sense of, you know, I need to be a better person. Boom, the kid dies, like a 10-year-old kid. Like, I mean, what's the, I don't see the argument necessarily for time.
Well, I could.
Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know
what you're saying.
Wait, can you repeat the question? I understand.
No, like my question is like, I think a big concept is time.
If the 10-year-old repents and then dies.
Yeah. Like,
Okay. I have.
like, is that possible? Like, I don't know.
I have an answer for that. Could I answer that?
Sure. Like,
Okay. From what I understand, until we reach the age of, 13, bar mitzvah, I mean, technically, we are not really, our behaviors, our actions, whatever we do are not really of our own doing. I mean, we're not
And
really
by the way,
responsible.
for those of us who have kids, it's a good thing. Right? They would not survive the cross-examination.
Yeah. So the point of the matter is, that's why they say, like, when you have a bar mitzvah, right? And you.
Well, then never mind 13.
But why can't you just be bad your whole life and say, oh, one day I'll just, fix it all up?
because somebody like
Yeah, but that's not.
I feel like somebody like that.
This
So
guy,
it's
he's
not
sleeping with the
spontaneous,
girls,
it's-
every lady. And then,
You're planning it to.
First of all, I'll tell you, it's like this. If you take a look at the Talmud at the end of Tractate Yoma, right, we know that everyone's familiar with the idea of Yom Kippur, right? The day of repentance, the day where we all get a clean slate, right? The day where everyone's all the Jewish people's sins collectively are wiped away. And we know that in from a historical perspective, we always look at Yom Kippur as the secret for Jewish continuity. 2,000 years ago, we were 1 million people, right? And then we were exiled, and they had expulsions and pogroms and inquisitions and crusades and blood libels and endlessly. And somehow we're still around as a unified people. Also, with a tiny amount of number, without any central authority, without having really a common language or a land, nothing. So how did we survive? So from a spiritual perspective, we say, listen, the reason why we survived is because every Yom Kippur we have a clean slate. So we never build up the spiritual dreck or the spiritual schmutz. That's the right word. The spiritual. We never build up that spiritual dirt, blemishes, or shortcomings that would warrant the Jewish people. I mean, look about it. You have the Mesopotamians, you have the Babylonians, great empires that were dominant, controlled the entire world. Right, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Ottomans controlled the entire world, entire known world, Europe, Asia, everything, and they're all gone. And somehow the tiny little Jewish nation, right, who marginalized physically, economically, in every way, socially, weren't allowed, were kicked out of every country in Europe, were expelled from England, France, Germany, Austria, everywhere, right? Dealt with exile, expulsion, pogrom, and Holocaust, and somehow we're still around. How are we still around when everyone else is done?
Yeah, there's Christians and Muslims. You're taking this. Israel is very different than any other nation. Like, we're a very religion-based nation compared to.
Israel is?
No, I'm saying compared to other cultures over there. And then all these pagan cultures got taken over by Christianity and Islam.
Yeah, but even Christianity and Islam, they split into multiple factions, right? Even at the onset of Islam, you have the split between the Sunnis and the Shiites, who hate each other's guts, right? Who they hate them more than they hate the Jews, right? Oh, well, I don't know if that's technically true.
Equally.
Huh? different topic. Yeah, but the point is that it's remarkable that the Jews have survived for so long, and we say
As one nation.
as one nation, unified, with no place to live. Well, unified to a degree, but the point is that there's two reasons why. But one reason is that because we have the Yom Kippur, we have the refresh button, and I don't remember how we got to this.
The what?
I don't know how we got to
Refresh
this.
button.
Trace it back. I don't remember how we got to this point.
You're saying if you do whatever you want to do.
So at the end of Tractate Yoma, it says that if someone says, "Hey, listen, right now it's just after Yom Kippur, I have a whole other year to worry about. I can do whatever I want, right? And I know Yom Kippur will come around, and I'll repent, and everything will be fun and dandy." So that person, Yom Kippur doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
If Yom Kippur is contingent on the fact that when you committed the misdeed, you weren't saying, "Oh, I'll rely on Yom Kippur to do." So you can't say, "Oh, I'll do whatever I want and end my life." Plus, how do you know when you're going to die? You don't know when you're going to die. And plus, in every step you take further away, it's harder to get back. Look at the Jewish people today, right? On a collective scale, right? The further away they get from their Judaism, the harder it is to bring them back. You know how many Jews are in Houston that never saw the inside of a shul? Thousands upon thousands. Thousands upon thousands. Jews in Houston that never saw the inside of the shul. Can't tell you what, can't read any Hebrew, don't know anything about Judaism. But they're Jewish. And their children will be even one step further.
They're Jewish.
And it's much, much harder to bring them back to having a strong Jewish identity. Much, every step further away, it's twice as hard to get back. It's really unfortunate. But we still haven't figured it out. Did everyone read the other two stories, by the way?
No.
Did anyone?
Or did anyone? No. You did? Okay, so the first story is... The second one's the best, right? And that's why I started off with that. Well, that's what I was familiar with. So there was a Caesar who hated the Jews, and he says to everyone, "I'm going to kill the Jews."
Yeah.
And then this guy, one of his advisors, Ketia ben Shalom, he said, "Hey, you can't kill the Jews," because then he brings some sort of proof that you can't kill the Jews. And the Caesar says, "Well, you're right. I can't kill the Jews, but I'm going to kill you because you stood up to me, and I'm the emperor." So, as he's being led to the circular furnace where he's going to be killed, some Roman matron screams out to him. He says, "Hey, pity the ship that sails without paying the taxes," which means basically you are giving up your life for the Jews, and you're not even Jewish, right? You're like being a martyr for some other people. Ridiculous. So then he throwing himself on his foreskin, he cut it away, exclaiming, "I now pay the tax." Basically,
he gave
himself a circumcision. He's like, "Oh, now I'm kind of Jewish, right? I sort of hit a part of the Jewish people, so to speak." Well, not really, but... And then they threw him into the fire, and as he got in the fire, he made a proclamation, "All my possessions are going to Rabbi Akiva and his friends." And then, once again, the same exact story. We have the prophecy proclaiming him to be part of the afterlife, and Rabbi lamenting the fact that there's some people able to do it so fast, other people have to work so hard. And the last story, also I think a great story, also talking about the Hadrianic persecutions, right? Everyone's familiar with the Emperor Hadrian, the year 117, right? Roman Emperor, great Roman. I only know the dates because I'm teaching a Jewish history class. But basically, you have the Emperor Hadrian, who takes over control of the Roman Empire in the year 117 of the Common Era. And he makes what's known as the Hadrianic persecutions. He makes lots of laws curtailing the Jewish people's ability to exercise their religion. He says, you're not allowed to have circumcision, you're not allowed to keep the Shabbat, you're not allowed to study Torah, right? Very similar to what the Greeks did, right? The Greeks, Ptolemy, during the times of Hanukkah. Ptolemy or Antiochus, Ptolemy was someone else. Huh? Well, Titus is the Roman. Titus is the Roman general who destroyed the temple. No. Titus is the son of Vespasian. Roman general who destroyed the year 70 or 68, depends which historical period.
Happened during the time of the second.
Yeah, Hanukkah happened the year 167 before the Common Era, under Greek, right? Assyrian Greek to be precise. As we know, when Alexander the Great died in the year 323 before the Common Era. His empire was split into three different
Yeah,
Macedonian Greeks, the Assyrian Greeks, and the Egyptian Greeks. The Ptolemaites, the Assyrians, and the Macedonians, or Greek proper.
This is one of the Saragavachos.
Right. Anyhow, so Hadrian in 117, under the Great Roman Empire, he assumes emperorship and he makes lots of rules pertaining to the Jews' ability to practice religion, and that brought about the Bar Kokhba revolt of the year 132, and we're familiar with that because if you've been to Israel and you've seen Israeli coinage, you've seen images that they found on the coins that were minted after Bar Kokhba revolt succeeded in getting rid of the Roman Empire for 3 years, and they minted their own coins, which is a big deal in ancient society, right? So during the 400 years of Roman domination of the known world, you have a 3-year period where the Jews, led by Bar Kokhba, were able to get rid of the Romans and have sovereignty and have independence. But so anyhow, this story happens during the Hadrianic persecution. So anyone who was caught teaching Torah, they would kill them, which made the Jews so incensed, and they rebelled.
So who is the one who decided to cut his foreskin? So
That's a different story. Also,
I thought we were talking
we're on the last story.
We're on the last one.
Oh,
So they
I was like reading this part, and I'm like, you were saying
They found Reb Chanina ben Teradion. He was sitting and studying Torah, and publicly gathering assemblies, keeping the scroll of the law in his bosom. So they took hold of him and wrapped him in a scroll of Torah, and they put bundles of branches and set him on fire. Basically, they're trying to kill him in a really brutal way. And to make things worse, they put these pieces of wool, soaked it in water, and placed it upon his heart so that he shouldn't die quickly. Basically, they wanted to torment him for longer and torture him by prolonging his agony, so they prevented it by putting wool soaked in water on his heart so the fire wouldn't engulf him, wouldn't kill him so quickly. His daughter says, I feel so terrible that I'm seeing you like this. He says, no, it's not so bad. I'm with the Torah. The Torah's suffering with me. It's like my, it comforts me. And then his disciples say, what do you see? And he says, well, I see the letters flying into the ear. They say, why don't you die quickly? What?
It was just a vision of this. How can anyone have a conversation with someone going through this? Right? You just think about it. This guy's on fire. There's no absolutely no way that they can have a conversation. Like the daughter's there, and it just
Is there anything in the
This
Talmud
is one of the
metaphorical?
greatest, someone very
Okay, wait.
Is
so
this
complete
metaphorical?
control over
Is
his.
this metaphorical?
Huh? It's possible. We don't know what is metaphorical, what's not metaphorical. Wait, but why not? If it's a small fire, and he's not, let's say he's
wrapped in wool soap.
and everyone's there, and it's a really quick conversation. He's like, and his daughter's like, I haven't seen you like this. He's like, it's not the Torah's with me. I'm saying, is it possible? Okay, remember, is it possible that there was a glacier over the Sahara? It's possible. It's hard to imagine how it was, but it's possible, right? Okay. And then the students say to him, why don't you open your mouth so the fire should consume you? He says no. And then the executioner says to him, Rabbi, if I raise the flame, which indicates that it wasn't such a big flame, and I take away the tufts of wool, will you cause me to enter the world to come? He says yes. So he swore to him. And the executioner raised the flame, took off the wool, and Rabbi Chanina ben Teradion died right away. And then the executioner himself jumped into the fire, and he also died. And like previously, there was this prophecy, he is a portion of what to come, and Rebbe is crying because some people acquire eternal life in one instant, while others have to struggle for years and years to do it.
And the Rebbe is crying because of it.
Yeah, all three stories. Is it sad? It's absolutely clear that he's sad. He's crying. That's what is clear. So, is this 100% literal? I don't know. Is it metaphorical? It's possible, but certainly it's a lesson either way, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have been told about it. Now, so there's one question that Eric asked: how is it possible? There's lots of. This is, by the way, if you ever hear a Talmudic or a halachic discussion on euthanasia, right? Mercy killing. this is the source. This is the number one source that everyone brings up. This massive, massive problem from a halakhic perspective on the story. How did Rav Chaim try to agree to have his death be expedited? That is euthanasia. Does Judaism believe in euthanasia, really? A lot of people get really upset about that. Right? We have a doctor in the house. Well, that's for another time. But I don't know. I'm kind of opening the floor. What does everyone think? You see 3 stories, 3 people that seem to, well, if not martyr themselves for a good cause, will certainly dedicate themselves or challenge themselves in a great way. And I think probably more specifically, we see people that are willing to make major, major life changes and abide by them to the end. Means this executioner, when he woke up that day, he was any one of the other mercenaries that were working for the Romans at the time. That's what he was. And then he made a strong decision to say, no, I'm not going to oblige by the tyranny, and I'm going to stand up. I'm going to have my Paul Revere moment, right?
At the end, it was only a minute to the end. So
it was only what?
There's only like a minute until his end. So
that
he doesn't really get to live it out.
Well, there's so much more so. He was so engulfed by his decision.
If he didn't truly change, he would have asked the rabbi, if I expedite the fire, will you let me in, whatever, and then he would have never jumped in.
Yeah, so
If
he
the
should have
rabbi
jumped in.
said no,
Like he would have,
Well, maybe he jumped in because he didn't want to screw it up. Because he could have achieved the spiritual plateau, and then, like you said, maybe if he was challenged. That's a good. That's a very good point because you're not allowed to kill yourself.
Sure.
So much so that if that in Maimonides, in the laws of murder, he says that someone who commits suicide is a murderer. And just because you killed yourself doesn't mean you didn't kill someone. You're a murderer. And he's viewed as such. So yes, it is very, very peculiar. It is very peculiar.
If you commit suicide, you're a murderer.
Yeah. It's a nice...
Even if...
what?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was telling this to someone on a totally separate topic, but we know that we're obligated to save someone. You see someone who's in a life compromising situation. You're obligated to do anything to save the person, right? If the building collapses and someone, you be on Shabbat, Yom Kippur, you have to clear away, you have to call up the cops, you have to do everything. You have everything that you could possibly do to save someone. But what if someone's committed suicide? Someone jumps off a building, and then they're on the bottom. They lay down. They fall off the building, and they're writhing on the floor, and they're still alive. Are you obligated to save that person? So most opinions say yes. One opinion brings up this idea, and the idea is that the source that tells us every obligation we has to have a source. The source, one of the sources that tells us we have to save people, is vahashevoso lo, which means to return lost objects to someone. And if you have to return someone's iPhone that they lose, or they leave at the bar or at the coffee house, to return it to them, how much more so you have to return to them their life, right? But if someone willingly, knowingly leaves their iPhone on the floor, it says, "I'm leaving it. Whoever takes it, I don't care," right? Then you're allowed to pick it up and keep it. You don't need to return to them. You only need to return someone a lost object if they unknowingly lost it. But if they knowingly lost it, you don't need to return to them. So someone says, "Hey, wait a minute. If the source why we have to save someone is because of returning the lost object, and a lost object we don't need to return if they knowingly lost it. So if someone jumps off the building and they're knowingly losing their life, maybe we don't." Well, yeah.
I have a comment.
We don't go with that, Eric. But
However, but the thing is, we are not objects.
Yeah, life is not an object.
You're making the analogy.
you don't like the objectification of women? Is that what this is about?
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing is,
I object.
that doesn't. That's what the analogy is.
I know. I just brought that up. I don't know why I brought it up because I was just talking to someone about it.
Oh, it's a good point though. Like, so the rat, like you mentioned, euthanasia. The rabbi kind of killed himself in a way.
Well, the rabbi and this guy also.
This guy also killed himself.
Right. Very strange.
Wait, the rabbi.
I don't know.
The rabbi didn't kill himself.
Yeah.
Well, the rabbi kind of agreed that the guy would expedite his death.
Expedite his death is he was forcibly put with Torah around him and set on fire.
Right, but the whole point that you say is that euthanasia, which is a whole other.
So wait a second. He didn't kill him. It's like
No, he hastened his death.
he hastened his death by putting this.
And hastening, is hastening.
Well, he knew he was going to be
hastening murder.
He was going to be killed anyway, so
Yeah.
how's it going to get less painful?
Well,
It's a very good question.
That's kind of how euthanasia is. You're going to die. You have this crazy
Maybe the whole point
malignancy
of this
to your
story
brain, you're suffering.
is actually what we're doing
You know,
here.
I can't suffer through this. Just let me go.
Uh-huh.
Right? So that's
I guess so. It's like you could go on and extrapolate that into so many different things because the thing is,
DNRs.
you supposing a person could
Do not
could
resuscitate.
say, well, who's to say that a person?
Huh?
everyone should have.
Really? Makes your life easier.
Who's to say that? I mean, that person.
Everyone should have a DNR? Not 22-year-olds.
No, but
Every 95-year-old.
When you're 90, you should have a DNR.
In other words.
Yeah, but there's your question. Some people say, hey, what is the halachic permissibility of DNRs? I've spoken about this many times, about the halachic perceptions of euthanasia. But this is one of the sources that one brings down. There's active and passive euthanasia. It used to be that in the hospitals they had oxygen tanks for the oxygen. Now it's just all through the building. They used to have oxygen tanks.
They still do.
Well, they don't have tanks in most, they don't have tanks that can be refilled like propane tanks.
Oh, they do have the tanks. They're on reserve.
Yeah,
Like,
reserve. Yeah,
just-
right. But it used to be that there was a question if someone was, in a vegetative state or in a coma, or someone's going to die, someone's 100 years old. We're not allowed to kill them for sure, but we don't need to take steps to keep them alive. So if their oxygen ran out, we're not allowed to pull out their oxygen, but if there's no oxygen, we don't have to refill it. But I want to close. I think the point that I wanted to have tonight was a discussion, which I think we were successful in. But also, I think this idea that generally there's a ground and pound. There's the grind in order to affect change. Occasionally, there's going to be some sort of opportunities that we have to just skyrocket, to just take the rocket ship and achieve things that we were not. I think it works like that probably in relationships as well. Relationships generally, there's a grind, which I know it doesn't sound so romantic, but real relationships aren't romantic. Some say romance is part of a relationship, but it's not all that. And speak to anyone who's ever been in a relationship and ask them how long does the fairy tale romance last. It's somewhere between 3 to 6 months. That's how long it lasts, right? It's across what everyone knows that. There's the grind. You want to make it work? You got to grind it out. You got to work. You got to struggle your way through it. It's not depressing, but it's just reality. But I think that there might be some times where a couple or an individual could go through a situation or an event or an episode or something that could just take a quantum leap in their relationship. I think it could happen. As to whether or not we all have these opportunities, so I heard a story. The great Rabbi Moses Feinstein of blessed memory. So he was I spoke last Wednesday. I spoke last Wednesday about abortion in Jewish law. It's available on my website at rabbiwolbe.com. Highly advise anyone who's interested in listening to the Jewish perspective on abortion, which may shock you. I think it actually might, because we know everyone has their opinion: pro-life, pro-choice, pro-this, pro-that, women's right to choose, life begins at conception. All these little phrases that are bouncing across our brains, and it's just if you want to hear absolute clarity, okay, yeah. And I said there are no positions of my own. None of the positions I took were my own. I said, hey, what's the perspective? I said it's ridiculous. There's been no progress on this debate for years. No one. There's no working across the aisle. No one reaches common ground because people talk in different languages, right? And advisable to listen to rabbiwolbe.com. But I mentioned Rabbi Moses Feinstein. And I mentioned him here again. So who was Rabbi Moses Feinstein? He was the number one halachic posek of the past 100 years. Man of tremendous character and scholarly ability. I'd say, you Google him, read his Wikipedia pages, etc. But he was, think of him as the Jewish Da Vinci of the past 100 years, like someone that just a tremendous character and someone with tremendous clout and influence in the Jewish world. He died on Purim, which is a holiday, and there were 100,000 people by his funeral in New York, in Manhattan. And then they flew to Israel, and there were 250,000 people that came to pay the respects to the rabbi who died. Means 250,000 people on Purim in Israel were just stopped their whole life and just went. You spent hours, just to give you just a snapshot. Anyhow, so he once published an opinion about a certain matter, and there was some other guy, some run-of-the-mill guy, who considered himself to be someone worthy of arguing with him. He wrote a contrary opinion and belittled Rabbi Feinstein. And then this person had the gall to come to Rabbi Feinstein and ask him for a letter of approbation for his book. Approbation is like endorsement. So think of it. Think of it as someone, you are the number one man. Someone belittles you. Someone who's not worthy of being in the same sentence with you belittles you. And then they come to your house and say, "Oh, could you maybe write for me a letter that I can put in front of me, a forward to my book, endorsing me?" And then, so people were shocked by this person's gall. And then Rabbi Feinstein writes this amazing letter, and he's saying that this guy...
I don't understand why he wouldn't. You make it sound like he belittled. He challenged.
No.
He belittled.
Okay, whatever. This is the story. But think of it as yes, there's a challenge. But remember, we're not boxers here. Right. There's a challenge with a certain modicum of respect. You don't challenge the president, right?
You do.
So you could challenge, right? You could challenge the president, but you don't challenge the president like you would challenge someone in a bar. There's a modicum of respect, right? There has to be. Yeah, that's good.
Sorry, no. There's a certain level of esteem that this guy had obviously earned.
I know.
Like a judge.
A judge. Think of a judge. You don't speak to them as bros.
You know how we have pet peeves, and that is a pet peeve of mine. Why? What did he do for me?
There's a certain respect for the office of the president. Okay, we are.
Argue all you want. I don't agree.
Okay, but, when you have someone who's a lot older than you, a lot smarter than you, a lot more accomplished than you, there's a certain modicum of respect that you should have. If you don't, anyhow, so he writes. So let's get to the point of the story I wanted to say. And he writes this beautiful letter to him, and then his people were like, "Huh? This guy, why'd you do that?" And he said, "The Talmud says that it's possible to acquire your world in 1 hour." And he said, "I think this may be my 1 hour, my one opportunity," to quote Jared. And what I took from this story, so the particulars of the story we could argue about, but what I took from it, that it's possible that each one of us in our lives, in our relationships, in our business, in our everything that we encounter, every challenge, every area of our life, we have lots of parts of our lives, that there's lots of interplay. We have a career, family, right, responsibilities to ourselves, etc. But in all these areas, I think it's possible that we'll each have, every once in a while, this opportunity. And you can't script it. You don't know what it's going to be. But you'll have some sort of opportunity to, make a jump, make a leap, and have a tremendous accomplishment that could really, in one instant, one episode, to just make a tremendous change in who you are.
You really don't know what's the last hour. You never ever have any idea what's the last hour.
What, when you're going to die?
I know, but I'm saying, you should always kind of be living like that.
Maybe that's
and that idea of constantly striving to do better.
Maybe that's
ties back into that. Sure.
Maybe that's the lesson. The whole point of these stories is you never know what the last hour is. So you always strive to.
Does it have to be that you have to die? I don't know. It seems.
You
It seems.
Yeah, because like you reach that moment, you make the right choice, you do the right thing, and
Boom.
I'm done now, whatever. Hang out for the next.
I'm ready.
So that guy was.
You do it. You're like, okay. You know what's
What
gonna
am I supposed to
happen?
do now?
Where's the train? Where's the?
Where's the light? Where's the light?
I mean, he was lucky that he was given at least an hour to rectify it.
Well, we have the Mishnah. The Mishnah says in Chapters of the Fathers, he says,
He didn't know.
"Do tshuva, repent, the last day of your life." And the indication is, well, you don't know when the last day of life, so every day you should be living as if it's your last day. You know, one of my favorite teachers, who someone asked him. Someone who was like known for his like following a schedule, and he said, "Let's say you knew tomorrow was the last day, the day you're going to die. Right? Let's see. We asked a question on the table, like if you knew that tomorrow was the day, what would you do?" This is also a good question for discussion. But he said, well, I would wake up and, pray the morning prayers like I do every day. And then like go home and eat breakfast like I do every day. And he went through his whole daily schedule and says, I would do exactly what I do every day. And it's the kind of thing where like, if you really live your life,
Like, really,
and I would take my nap.
If he actually knew, he would be spending his time with his family.
Oh, why?
What do you mean? If the world's ending, you're not going to be sitting going through all your daily goals and doing this and doing that. You're going to be like,
No, but that's...
I should go see my family for something.
No. The reason why, okay, if we were to ask a question, I know we're going overtime. I don't like going overtime. If we ask a question right now around the table, what I'm not going to do unless you want to. If we ask a question, if you knew tomorrow you're going to die, right, what would you do? What that does, the reason why it's such a fascinating question is because it awakens a certain part of our brain. And that part of our brain is the priorities part of our brain. And then because we're about to die, suddenly this thing is awakened. For our whole life, our job is to try to tap into that part of our brain on a regular basis, to live in accordance with your priorities, right? When we're faced with death, that's automatically awakened. And that's why we say, if I'm about to die, I better go deal with my family and deal with the important things in life. But if you're someone who's really living with your priorities at all times, you don't need that light bulb to go on. It's on already.
We were saying about that patient who was terminally ill and suffering. But then, if that person, does the person have an opportunity to alleviate his own suffering, for example, even though he may be suffering? Maybe if he doesn't have the opportunity to alleviate his suffering and he knows he's going to die, is it going to affect his family, his extended family? Because we are not just committed to ourselves, but we are also responsible. We're also committed to our families too, and so what we do to ourselves also affects others too. And so, but then